So the Arc Raiders server slam is underway, and I've been playing it for quite a while now, and I decided I wanted to kind of throw my thoughts into a video about what I think about it, if I think that it's going to be a solid game at launch, if I'm planning on playing it, these sorts of things, and if I think that you guys will like it as well. So the thing is, for the most part on my channel, I cover first-person shooters. That's sort of where I, as someone who plays video games, orients a lot. You know, for the most part, first-person shooters are where I usually spend the most time, but third-person shooters are also games that I enjoy as well. I've played the Ghost Recon games. Third-person PvP is also something that I'm not unfamiliar with because I did play PUBG way back when it basically kind of first came out, and I did third-person a lot in that game as well. But personally, I did want to give Arc Raiders a chance because I wanted to see exactly what this game was about. I'm not super familiar with the extraction shooter genre. I haven't really played any extraction shooters before, to be 100% honest. And of course, I know there's Escape from Tarkov, but I've never played that game personally, so I wanted to know exactly what Arc Raiders was going to provide as a game experience. And personally, I'm pretty impressed with what I got to play, so enough of the intro, let's just dive right on into it. Arc Raiders, for the most part, is a very different game than what I'm used to playing, and I didn't know exactly what to expect going into it. The game starts you out with a bit of a small tutorial, some lore about what's happening in the world around you, how these Arc machines have kind of taken over the surface and people are sort of living below, trying to scrape by and survive, and you have these people called Raiders, who you play as, that go up to the surface and have to find loot, take out Arcs. However, you also fight off other Raiders. So that's kind of why this game is a PvPvE, so player versus environment. It's a little bit of a different style than what Arc Raiders actually started out as. It was supposed to be PvE, but then the devs kind of felt like it wasn't a fun game to play, so they switched up the sort of situation. Now this comes with some positives and some negatives, which I will be discussing in this video, of course. For the most part, there's a lot of really impressive things about this game, and you might have seen a lot of people online calling it like a movie, which is definitely true. I do think this game does play very cinematic. The visuals are really nice. I actually played this on my PlayStation 5 and the game looks absolutely fantastic. It plays really well, it's very smooth, the movement works really nicely, everything played for the most part in a very well optimized state. I didn't experience any random glitches or bugs. There was some minor packet loss, nothing game breaking or anything like that, so for the most part this game actually ran really smoothly. Loading into matches was also very quick. I didn't really have to sit at the menu for a long period of time. If you're playing solo, you will queue mostly against other solo players, and that's kind of what I noticed. Now, I did see some people online talking about how they had a mix of solo and other groups that they faced off against in their matches, but personally, the game I found does prioritize putting you with solo players if you're queuing in solo. So that's something to keep in mind. So the thing is, with this server slam, it's not really an open beta in the sense that the technical tests were sort of betas. This is a very different type of scenario where they've locked a lot of the content and you only play in a very specific area and you only get access to very specific mechanics. I think that this wasn't really the best decision so close to the launch. I think that if they were gonna do something like this, they probably should have just made it an open beta or something like that. That really helped other games like Battlefield 6, for instance. I think that making it a technical test, for the most part, a lot of people might not have known about this game, or they only recently were able to try it in this technical test and they might not realize that this game actually offers a whole lot more. Because when you look at the gameplay from the technical test, there's a whole lot more to do. It's just you only get a very small piece of that. So I do think that Embark should have probably not locked this much behind if they wanted to kind of introduce this game to a lot of people, because let's be fair, this is sort of part of the marketing of this game. But anyways, that aside, the gameplay loop for the most part is very much what you'd expect in an extraction shooter, what I've come to learn from that genre after doing some research. You go into the world, you find stuff, you fight against other players, and you extract, and you try to get to safety. Now, there's a couple of things that I liked and didn't like about this. For the most part, I think one of the issues with the extraction genre, and what I've seen from gameplay of extraction shooters, is that when you have an extraction point and in a PvP setting, you're going to have people that just camp the extraction point, take out other players, and take all their loot, and then you, after having struggled to find everything, kind of are put in this scenario. Now, the thing is, when you're downed, you can still extract, but a player can also take you out in that sort of position. So there's a bit of a negative side to this, and for a lot of people that's not going to be the most fun in the game because it does lead way into a little bit of toxicity when you're playing against other people. You might be able to extract very safely, but a lot of people will be camping at extraction points, so that that is something to keep in mind and to be careful of when you're playing this game. Now, the environmental enemy portion of this game, which are the arcs, are these sort of robots. Now, for a lot of people, they don't like having to face off against robots, but I didn't really mind. I think there's a couple of things that bothered me and didn't bother me about them. So firstly, they are pretty overpowered. This is just kind of a disclaimer. If you're going into the game, you haven't played it yet, for instance, they're very overpowered. That means they can take you out relatively quickly. Some of them are very annoying. There's these sort of spider-like robots, for instance, that will latch onto you. They'll take out a bunch of your health, things like that. They're very annoying. The turrets will lock onto you. Some of the flying arcs around the area will also lock onto you and chase you down, things like that. So for the most part, they are pretty powerful. Now, what this does is it causes you to have to actually be strategic with your gameplay. You can't just run willy-nilly around the map and make a ton of noise. However, when you face off against one of these arcs, you could be put in a scenario where if your weapons are not very good, more often than not, you're just gonna lose. Now, I think that this does add to the actual environment of the gameplay because it makes it so that the arcs genuinely feel like they could have caused this whole sort of apocalyptic scenario that's happened in the lore of the game, so it makes sense from a lore perspective. From a gameplay perspective, it does require you to just be more strategic. So I didn't mind this much, but in a way, it kind of got a little bit annoying sometimes, but at the end of the day, it's not the biggest issue, I think. So I did read through a lot of reactions to the PvP element of this game. Some people didn't like the gunplay, didn't like the mechanics of PvP, other people did. I think it's fine. I actually kind of liked it personally, and I thought that it was good. I think the gunfights were solid as well, and also pretty much all the weapons in this game are not super crazy powerful, especially when you're at lower levels or you're just starting out. But the thing with an extraction shooter model like this, and I guess kind of what I'm seeing is a common issue in some older extraction shooter games, and what sort of happened in Arc Raiders is that you're gonna have people who are ultimately way better than you, who have been putting thousands of hours into this game at some point, and if you're just starting out and you're facing off against these people, you are going to be at a severe disadvantage. I think the thing is, Arc Raiders kind of tried to position itself as a change for the extraction shooter genre, and while there are things it seems like that are different, a lot of the common issues with the extraction shooter genre are still sort of there, and why I think that at the end of the day, you kind of have to be aware of this, but I don't think that should detract you from playing this game. This is genuinely a really fun game, and it's genuinely a really visually nice game, and it's really cool, and I do think it's a bit of a different experience, especially if you're someone like me who hasn't really played so many extraction shooters. I don't think this is that crazy of a game to get into. The gameplay mechanics very much feel like something you've probably already played. There's nothing I think that you won't be able to kind of handle in this game. There's a lot to explore, and I'm aware that there's going to be a lot more maps in the actual release of the game. I think that you should just understand that this is a very, very, very limited sliver of the actual full experience. Do I think this game was overhyped in a way? I think for some people, the way that they sort of sold it as being a super revolutionary, different type of game, I think maybe it set people's expectations to a point that I don't know if this game was going for or not, but personally, I think it's a good game. I do think it's reasonably priced, and I do think that if you aren't super aware of extraction shooters, that it's a different experience to try, and I do find that this game would probably be more fun if you had friends playing with you. Playing it solo is perfectly valid, there's no problem there, but you're just gonna have to be aware that most people are not friendly and most people are not going to assume that you're friendly. So one of the mechanics advertised in Arc Raiders is that you can team up with other players that you meet, but for the most part, you're probably not gonna find many people that want to team up with you. It's just kind of the reality of the situation. If you don't like third-person shooters in the slightest, then you're probably not gonna like this game. It's very much a third-person shooter with full third-person shooter style mechanics and everything like that. I've played enough third-person shooters that I personally don't really mind. I prefer first-person shooters, and that's always going to be, for me, the case, but I don't mind at all the third-person shooter experience, and I don't think Arc Raiders implemented it in a bad way. I think it's solid, and I can't wait to see what this game is going to be like at the full release. I want to see all the mechanics. I want to try everything out. I think it's going to be a fun game, and I think it looks like Embark is planning on putting a lot of support into this, so far, I've got a positive takeaway from that slam test, even though it was a very limited experience. experience, what we got to see bodes well for the full release of the game, and I'm hoping that it ends up being really great. What I do wish was there though was a little more environmental enemies that weren't just robots. I think it would be cool if we had a mix of things, like if there were some NPCs that were not very friendly, if there were maybe some animals, things like that. Stuff that just adds a little more to the environment. It's not a huge thing, but just be aware that most of what you're fighting, if not other players, are going to be robots. But as someone that likes sci-fi, I don't care about that. I'm cool with it. Anyways, let me know what you guys think about Arc Raiders in the comments below. If you're going to be picking it up at launch or not, if you guys liked it, didn't like it, why or why not, those sorts of things. Like, share, subscribe, and be sure to turn on notifications set to all so you don't miss out on any uploads. And that's all for today, folks.